Hi, everyone. It's so nice to have you today. I hope you are doing well and staying safe at home. My name is Olivia, and I am going to introduce you to a breakthrough methodology called prototype thinking. Now, prototype thinking is a set of tools for creating very rapid prototypes. It was originally designed at GoogleX, and we've refined it over a number of years so that you can apply it to almost any sector, any startup, nonprofit, corporate, innovation lab, enterprise, you name it. The great thing about prototype thinking is that you can do this at home without any technology. So it's a tool that really can democratize the speed of learning, but also the speed at which you iterate and test. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I'm a senior partner of a company called Prototype Thinking Labs. We're based in the Bay Area, although right now I'm in Vancouver, Canada, which is where I live. Other things, I have been a humanitarian. I used to work in war zones and in conflict zones, specifically in Syria during the peak of the crisis in 2012 and in Fukushima, Japan. And then after that, I left the nonprofit world and I started my own company. Well, actually a number of companies, which many have failed and this one has survived. So here I am today. I'm also a beauty queen. During COVID, I won a beauty pageant. So if you have a chance, ask me, because it's a really funny story. I'd love to tell it. And lastly, a little bit more context about prototype thinking before I actually tell you and show you how to use the methodology. It is the next evolution of design thinking and design sprints. So if you're looking for a great technique that is human-centered, it's empathy-based, it helps you creatively solve problems in 10 times the speed with less effort and cost, this is your technology, this is your approach, and this is my favorite methodology of all. All right, so I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, and I know that I can't hear you right now because you're on the other side of that screen, but I'd love for you to shout out that answer out loud. If you can talk to your cat or your dog, your roommate, or you can just say it out loud in your head. So my first question is, do you remember Google Glass? Like, does anyone remember Google Glass? I'm from the Bay Area, born and raised in San Francisco, and I definitely remember this. And I also remember that no one is using it right now. So the backstory of Google Glass is that this was the very first use case for prototype thinking. And if you can remember back into the early 2010s when Google Glass first came out, everyone thought this was a hot, sexy tech toy. It was so cool. You know, you could pull it out of your pocket, put it in, well, actually, you wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to pull it out of your pocket because Google Glass would actually project anything in your phone onto your visual display. So imagine you're driving in your car. You don't need to listen to your GPS. You don't need to swipe on your phone. Google Glass is projecting the directions of where you're going onto the dashboard of your car. You could also be in a conference, forget everybody's name, and Google Glass would project the name of the person and hover it above their head. Like, I loved this concept. It was so cool. I want to ask you another question. So where is Google Glass today? Do you know? Do you see people using it? If you Google search the word Google Glass, you'll find no shortage of articles calling it the biggest technology flop in Google's history. A lot of people know of Google Glass as that cool invention that really didn't get adopted by the mainstream market. And there were a lot of issues with it. People didn't want to be on buses or on trains or, walking down the street and have conversations with people not knowing if they were recorded. There were also a lot of features that made it cool, but it just wasn't sticky enough for someone to want to replace their regular glasses with Google Glass. However, the least known fact about Google Glass is that it's relatively successful in a range of commercial industries, in places like surgery, where surgeons are using Google Glass to project the details of the surgery over the body of work. You also see it in industrial manufacturing and specs. People are using this to build airplanes and repair cars. There are a number of different companies that are licensing this technology from Google right now, so it is actually thriving as an enterprise solution. Now, I want to ask you another question. So this picture that you're seeing right now, that's a picture of Larry Page. One of our partners, Tom, took this picture of Larry on the very first days that the X team was gathered to build out this prototype. And my next question is, how long do you think it took to build this very first prototype, ugly prototype that you see right now? Take a guess. 3 years? 2 months? A day? What do you think? Well, it actually took 4 hours, and I'm going to show you exactly how that was done. Over here is an experiment, and this experiment is to solve for what would it be like if you could walk around the world and have digital information overlaid onto your physical environment. So we have a coat hanger. The top portion is meant to go above your neck, and the bottom portion rests against your chest. That's connected to a Pico projector and plexiglass and a sheet protector. You can buy a sheet protector at a Walgreens or any type of convenience store. And really what this allows you to do is hold this contraption and have that digital information projected into your physical environment. So perhaps you could be walking down the street, and instead of walking into a restaurant, you could pull up the Yelp ratings before you go in. You can't see it here, but the netbook was actually placed into a woman's satchel, so a crossbody purse that day, so that you could have this simulated hands-free experience. In the next experiment over here, you're going to see hair bands, which are connected to fishing line, and then run through this contraption that ultimately toggles a presentation clicker. So you could hold these hair bands and swipe right and swipe left and actually move things in your phone or on your computer. So you could swipe right and go forward and email in your inbox, swipe back, maybe go back and email, toggle through photos. It gave you this really basic and simple functionality of being able to control your phone. And the challenge that actually led to this design and this creation was, what if Google was in your brain? Over here, we have an experiment to essentially test how the Google Glass might be able to fit on someone's face to make it really comfortable and seamless from day to night. So what we have is modeling wire that was cut and framed in the exact same shape of the glasses, and then clay, which was cut in the exact same weight as the electronic components. And then that clay was taped on different places on the glasses so the team could experiment with how to best distribute the weight. And something that they learned in just the first few days and hours was that you actually are able, a human body is able to hold a lot more weight in the back of their ears. And so if you want to make glasses comfortable, you'll add weight to the back of your ears, which acts as a fulcrum, lifting the glasses off your nose, making it more comfortable. I know you guys have probably played with VR glasses and lots of headsets, and you know how top heavy they are, right? Can you imagine someone wanting to wear that from 9 a.m. to a 12 o'clock meeting to go to lunch? It's impossible. And the fact that the X team was able to find this critical consumer insight in just the first few hours of testing is remarkable, because anyone building face-related hardware therefore after in the future, even to this day in 2020, would have to know that insight. So over the course of several months, the X team ran hundreds of rapid iterations, and they came to the conclusion that there just wasn't enough information to support a consumer's day-to-day use. So they went to leadership and they said, hey, we have these two recommendations. We can either go directly to enterprise because we know we have the applications, and we know it can work, or we can wait around a little bit more, build out more applications, make it more sticky for consumers, and then launch for consumers in a few years. Okay, so I'm in the business of asking questions. I love to ask questions. What do you think leadership said? What direction do you think they went in? Well, if you know the story, leadership said, let's go to consumer now because it's so cool. And they did. And they went directly to consumer, and it was a huge flop. We had people who did want to wear Google Glass, and then there were some people who didn't want to look like Schwarzenegger. They didn't want to be associated with sort of this really, really early adoptive technology that wasn't very consumer and mass market friendly. And so what happened is later Google did launch for enterprise, but they launched much slower than they needed to. And there were already other competitors by the time that they got there. So why did I spend 10 minutes teaching you about prototype thinking and its use of Google Glass, especially if you're not building face-related hardware? Well, because there are some really key lessons that we learn. And the first lesson that I want to share with you is that there is a very big difference between having a cool idea and the data that you get back. Even the team at GoogleX, the smartest team in the world, like, can you imagine the type of people that are working on these disruptive innovations? They used to call this department the Department of Science Fiction because they were working on technologies and products that wouldn't be used in this day and age, maybe somewhere in the future. And even Sergey Brin, being the sort of leader who had amazing, smart ideas, He even argued that Google Glass would work and it should be red. The display should be red because red is the least energetic photon of light and because it's always red in science fiction. So this story really is about listening to the data that comes back, because the X team did test a Google Glass with a red display, and they immediately found that it was the worst color to test with because red is very difficult to separate from the other colors in your physical environment. So you're just constantly walking through the world, seeing everything in the color red, and that's not very fun. This story is also listening to the data and letting the data drive your decision making. We're often in boardrooms, in meeting rooms, in team huddles where everyone has a very strong opinion. We call these guess-a-thons. People come with their inflated opinions of what they think will work and what they think will be true. Sometimes it's people who are the loudest in the room. You've constantly heard about this. People who are the hippos, the highest paid people in the room, the people who just have that seniority and can get their opinion to the top. Well, this is about democratizing opinions and actually following the experimental outcomes that come back and letting us use that to drive the conversation. Because if we can do that, we can make sure that whatever we build for our customer really works for them at every single touch point and from end to end, because it's actually been validated by customer data. The next lesson that we learn is that there is a difference between something called a conjecture and an actual. In the design world, we use the word hypothesis or an assumption all the time. It's the most used word. If you sit down in a design thinking sprint, that is what we're doing. We're taking what we know to be true, what we think we know to be true, and turning that into actuals, which are learnings that are directly observing human behavior. Now, a conjecture is not bad. A conjecture is a hypothesis. It's an educated guess. It's what we learn from market research, from interviews, from what people say they think they want. But the thing about conjectures is that they're speculative. They're also less accurate and precise than actuals. Actuals are the best form, the highest resolution and reliable data that we can get because it's what we observe in the real world. So I'll give you an example. In quarantine, I thought that I was going to be a beast at the gym. I thought that I would go to work out possibly 4 times a week, maybe 5 times. What else was I doing, right? We have this little gym downstairs, and I was going to put it on my calendar and go every single day. Now, that is my conjecture. I self-predicted that I would work out 4 to 5 times a week. And the reality is I've probably worked out maybe once, twice, at best, 0 times a week. That's the actual. And the reason why we make this distinction is because we want to take all of our conjectures around a user-oriented product and go run experiments. So we want to turn our conjectures into experiments and let our actuals become our decisions. The next lesson that we learn is we're always looking for something called a magic moment. Now, in design, a magic moment for us is 0 to 10 seconds of when you can create a truly delicious, impactful, delightful experience for your customers. It's when you're giving them the sense that, whoa, I've never done this before. This is so cool. I need to tell all my friends about it. I need to, it on Product Hunt. I need to talk about it on Yelp. You are giving them this experience of a moment of service. You're fundamentally impacting their life in a way that cannot be faked and it cannot be manufactured or engineered. And so this magic moment is really valuable because it allows us to understand whether our product or service has the potential to be something great. Now, in the example of Google Glass here, we have a picture of a surgeon. And I want to explain to you something that happens in surgery that a lot of non-surgeons don't know. And I personally had to learn this from people who were in the operating room. There's a moment in surgery where the surgeon is working on their patient. And in that moment, if something goes wrong, there are alarms that are sounding. There's alarms that are blaring, and the surgeon has to shoot their vision over to a digital display, absorb the information, make sense of it in their head, come back to the exact same place that they were once working, find that place, and resume. And maybe that might be a split second. It's not even 10 seconds. It's a split second, and it's millimeters of a difference. And if the surgeon is not in control, they could lose a life. And so in this high stakes scenario, the team had originally tested with a group of surgeons in the operating room. And they quickly discovered that Google Glass would give the surgeons this experience of not having to look away from their patient to get vitals. Now, this was groundbreaking, and the surgeons had this huge gut reaction to the impact that this creation could have. And they said, "You mean I don't have to look away from my patient to get vitals?" Because that had never happened before. So in our work in prototype thinking, we're always looking for that magic moment. And our theory is that, well, if it's so elusive and it's so valuable, how do we find it? Can we engineer it? Can we try enough options so that one of them, at least one of the options, becomes the obvious magic moment? And that is the case. So we believe that a product or service is a magic moment, and everything else is designed to help the customer get there. It's designed to help the user get to that moment as quickly as possible, and everything else is a distraction. So you just want to clear out the way for that magic moment. Now, in the course of giving this talk and giving workshops of this nature to thousands of people all around the world, I have asked this question to every single person. And I'd love to ask this question of you. So in the example of a magic moment, I like to ask, who here has ridden an Uber? Like, simple question, like who hasn't actually ridden an Uber? Now, think back to your very first time when you hailed an Uber. On a scale of 1 to 10, how valuable was that experience for you? 10 being mind-blowingly awesome, 1 being super awful, sucks, would write a scathing review about this on Yelp, and 5, so-so. It's not the best thing I ever did, it's not the worst. Pick your number now. I should play some Jeopardy music or something, like do, do, do. Okay, you've got 5 seconds to pick a number. Do you have it? Perfect. So personally, I would rate an Uber a 9 on a scale of 10. Now, I want you to think about a cab. What is a cab for you on a scale of 1 to 10? And I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. Okay, time's up. So my rating of a cab would be 2 or 3, maybe 3, definitely a 2 on a rainy day, and especially after 10 p.m. on Granville Street in Vancouver, which is where everyone goes clubbing and it's this huge party street and everything gets shut down and you're waiting for hours for a cab. So for me, I have scored Uber a 9 and a cab a 2. That is a 7-point difference. And the reason why we asked this very simple evaluation question, which is, how valuable is something on a scale of 1 to 10, is because we have discovered this really cool concept. It's called the 3-point offset. So if you can build a product or service that is 3 points better than the status quo, it's something that's naturally going to feel its own rapid awareness and adoption. It's something that will spread word of mouth. People will talk about it. It has that X factor, that je ne sais quoi, that makes it popular. Now, in San Francisco, I'm trying to think of some examples, but there are some cult favorite things like Blue Bottle Coffee, Phil's Coffee. There's like all of these consumer products that just go crazy and people talk about them. You're wondering why. Well, it comes back to this concept around a 3-point offset. Let me give you an example. So Uber has scored, in my opinion, a 7-point offset. That's one of the reasons why you have seen so much explosive consumer growth in their early years. And I'm not even here to promote them politically. Like, I don't actually endorse or align with Uber's values, but that is such a beautiful example because almost anywhere you go in the world, people will rate an Uber a 3-point offset and sometimes a 5 or a 7 or higher. Now, let's take another industry, something that is less sexy. Let's talk about airport security. So my least favorite airport in the world is LAX. Second to that is SFO. And going through airport security for me is a 3 or a 2. It's just so bad. You're standing in line for hours. I don't know why one person can be the only person to put their shoes in the bin. Like, why can't we be like YVR, which is in Vancouver, where we have a lineup of 5 people and they all come in? Maybe that has changed. I haven't been to SFO in a while, but as you know, airport security sucks. What about ordering Comcast? What about internet? Canceling internet? That's like a 1 for me. If you were in the business of building the user experience for ordering and canceling internet, and you hit 4 points out of 10, you would blow people's minds. Now, the baseline is not always 1, it's not always 4, it's not even 5. There's a lot of times where the baseline is different depending on the industry. Coke and Pepsi, 5 and a 5, right? But the idea here is that if you just hit 3 points higher, create something that will spread word of mouth, and you won't have to spend so much marketing it or distributing it. Okay. So I've talked a lot about magic moments. You're almost at the end here. How do we find a magic moment, right? It's this elusive, beautiful thing that is going to make our startup or our business or company succeed, how do we actually find it? Well, finding a magic moment is about creating something new. And creating something new is about solving a problem that hasn't been solved before. And in a lot of ways, it's about solving a problem that humanity hasn't solved before. So we can't use the same thinking that we use to solve the other problems, because by nature, if we applied it to what we're trying to do, it wouldn't work because it hasn't been done. So finding a magic moment is about trying a million different things. You're trying 1,000 things. You're testing with 30 users. You're in back-to-back sprints, going through cycles and trying to get to the moment where people are really telling you and expressing to you what they want. And a lot of times that data is going to be messy. You're going to have data from 2 weeks ago lying on some sticky notes on your wall. Now they're in the trash can. You have these big Post-it wall-ups. You have information in a spreadsheet, and half of the stuff that you've gathered contradicts what leadership says they want. It's this big mess. But what we say is that if you can get through this big, elegant mess and you try enough options and just one thing works, then everything will be amazing and beautiful and awesome and work out. So in a lot of conferences, you're going to see this light bulb as being the iconic symbol for stardom and success. And I don't think that's true at all. I think innovation is much more like this busy, beautiful, but a messy artistic studio where you're trying a bunch of things and you're trying to cobble together all of the different experiences to get to the heart of what really matters. Now, that might sound daunting because as people who are successful in their careers and people who really care about doing a good job, we are not designed to work. And I know that's even a popular, thing, like fail fast, like everyone says it, true. We're actually here to learn. So we're here to learn as much as we can. And then we're taking that 5 or 10% that works from each try and parlaying it into the next experiment. Now, what we've done is we've come up with a strategy to help you get through that painful mess as quickly and cheaply and as time sensitive as possible, because we know that everyone is in a race against time. We have deadlines, we have startup capital, we have runway that is burning thin, and we need to make sure that we can hit traction before all of that reaches zero. So the strategy goes like this. It's called rate-based goals. And the core idea is that we want to maximize our personal rate of learning by reducing the time it takes to try new things. Now, let me give you an example. The majority of us will come up with a great idea, right? Like we think it's a great idea, run out of the gate and pursue it. And if we do that, our chances of success are about 5%. Not because we had a bad idea and not because we're not competent, smart people. We're actually really smart people. No matter how smart we are, our chances of success are at 5% because that is the statistic of the amount of products that actually succeed, whether that they're successful in the market or the startup has a great exit. It's because any given idea only has about a 5% chance of being the right idea. But if we try 12 different variations of that original idea, our chances of success go up to 45%. If we try 50 different variations, our chances of success go up to 92, and that number is actually even higher because our learning compounds over time and is accretive. So we are learning fast, we're learning well, and our learning curve is asymptotically approaching 100, which means it's really damn good. Now, we also know from Nielsen that there is a lot of research that shows that you only need to test with about 5 to 6 people to yield 85% or one standard deviation of the core information you need to even determine what should be in your feature set. So if you're not sure, do people want this? Do people understand this? Will people buy it? What are the core essential features that users want? All of that can be answered by simply testing with 5 to 6 people in your target demographic of users. Mind blown, right? Because we've often been taught through Lean Startup that we should be testing through A/B. We should be split testing. We need to go through volume and look at the quantitative side. A lot of the information, almost 85% of why a product will fail, could actually be discovered through early testing and without a functional prototype, through qualitative conversations. So this is amazing. I would love to pause here and have you guys ask questions, but I really want to get to the end of this. I'm going to keep moving forward, okay? We're almost there. This is a slide that shows the classic way that people build ideas and projects. It usually takes them, on average, 24 weeks to go from the stage of having an idea to building it out as a prototype, to testing it with real people, and then making adjustments. Now, in prototype thinking land, we like to take this 24-week process and compress it into 3 days, into an hour, into an afternoon. So my goal is to show you how to get through that build process, which is also called a learning loop, in record time. I can't get into it too much here because this is really an intro talk, but if you're interested, you can always find me and we can get to the advanced curriculum later. But the key thing to know about how to compress that time and space is to look at how you are testing. Do you currently make iterations during your user test? And if you're not, please start. We use a formula for simulation-based testing that allows us to go through multiple microcycles in a test. And so it's called play, pause, stop. It allows us to pause the test at any time, quickly make iterations on the fly, like we're a NASCAR pit crew and the car is still running, and then we make those changes and then the car flies off. And then it allows us to make multiple iterations during a test, so that by the time we finish the test, we're already at the next evolution of the product or service. I'm going to wrap this up with a couple of principles. The first thing at work, when you're working on your projects, is to remember to always just go for it. Try it. Doing is the best form of thinking. So instead of milling around your work, thinking about something for 10 years, go out and see if you can try it in the first 10 minutes. Ultimately, we think that if we can't solve a problem in 10 minutes, we're never going to solve it in 10 hours because fundamentally, we're just missing information that lives out in the market. The next thing is, don't worry so much about being right or wrong. Focus on how much you can learn. If I learn things and our friend over here learns 10 things, then together as a team, we have learned 30 things, and that is great. The next thing is, don't worry so much about profit. It's not about getting that number to go up. I know you have a lot of pressure from your bosses, from your investors, but magic moments are about moments of service. Lastly, separate your conjectures and actuals. Start doing this in your workplace. You can say, hey, my conjecture is XYZ, and the actual that I learned from testing with someone last week is ABC. Lastly, stay close to the medium. Be in front of your users. Spend time with them. I have spent so many wasted hours with people who do not get to know their users. They build software for 6 months, never talking to a user because they never see them. And then after 6 months, the user's like, well, what does this even do? They don't understand it and they're ready to X out. Don't get to that place. Make sure you spend a lot of time with your users. Your users are your medium. You guys know this, maximize the rate of learning by reducing the time it takes to try new things. Be concrete and specific, but do not be afraid to guess. That is huge. We are always concrete and we are always specific. We are never abstract or ambiguous about what we're doing because it allows us to get higher fidelity feedback. And then the last thing is nail it before you scale it. By definition, when you scale something, that means the model has been proven to work from end to end. Now, if you can't make it work for one person, do not try to solve it for the 10th customer or the millionth customer, because at that point, you don't know how to make it generalized yet. So solve the experience end to end for one person, then try to solve for the second customer, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, and incrementally get to the 10th. So hopefully one day you can look up and 100 million people are using your product. I hope you had a great time learning prototype thinking. Thank you for sitting here for 30 minutes learning this approach. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your reflections, your feedback. You can reach me on the interwebs. I'm at prototypethinking.io, and you can email me at olivia@prototypethinking.io. Before you go, I want to let you know that I created a little bundle of things for you. So I will be sending out a link, and in this link, you'll get a copy to the slides. So hopefully you weren't like crazily trying to take screenshots of me speaking. You'll get a copy of the slides. You'll also get a free guide to prototype thinking that really hasn't been released anywhere. And you'll also get a link to an example user test so you can see what play, pause, stop looks like. I had a great time with you guys. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next year.